All right, congrats. You've made it to the end of the data modeling section of the course. Last item here is to cover the homework solution walkthrough, and then we'll move on to calculated fields with data analysis expressions or DAX. So let's jump right into question one. We need to navigate to our relationships view. Here we are, and perform two different actions. First, we're going to right click to delete each relationship between AW sales, AW customer lookup, and AW calendar lookup, including both of these date fields. So let's go ahead one by one, right click, delete, confirm, right click, delete, confirm, and you guessed it, right click, delete, confirm. So we had a nice, beautiful, fully functional data model, and now we are going to tear it to pieces. But don't worry, we're going to rebuild it. A big part of the reason we're doing this is to showcase just how easy it is to do that. So now I could continue on and right click each of the remaining relationships here, or if I'm doing a bulk action kind of like that, I like to use manage relationships in that case, where I can hold shift and select the last item to get all of the relationships selected. I can delete in one pass. There we go. When we confirm and close out, they all disappear at once. So a little bit more efficient approach. So that's question one. Easy enough, pretty straightforward. Question two, which you may have anticipated, is that we're going to now recreate those table relationships for ourselves from scratch. And we can use any method we choose here, whether it's the manage relationships option or the click and drag approach. I prefer click and drag, so I'm going to go ahead and take that approach. And I'm just going to start with sales, wire up the full sales model, and then move on to returns. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to go in order of the fields in my sales column. So order date to date, that defaults to my primary active relationship. Stock date to date, which comes in as an inactive relationship because we can't have two relationships, both active, from one table to the same primary key. So because I dragged my order date first, that's the one that gets priority. That's the one that gets activated. Moving along to product key to the product lookup, customer key to the customer lookup, and territory key to the sales territory key. Same deal with returns. We're going to pull return date, connect it to calendar date, territory key to sales territory, product key to product key. And now let's go ahead and build out our little snowflake here, subcategory to the subcategory key, category to category key. So there you have it. It probably felt a little bit scary when we deleted all those relationships. It felt like a whole bunch of work kind of going down the drain. But look at that. In about a minute, we've completely rebuilt our entire model. So now that we've recreated the relationship, question two asks us to confirm a few things. So number one, cardinality is one to many for all relationships. So I'm going to look at my lookups first, and I'm looking for that one icon. So that indicates that I'm connected to a primary key on this side of the relationship. Customers look good. Calendars look good. All three connections from there. Territories 1, 1. Product 1, 1. And then again, same thing with my snowflake. Each of these are serving as primary keys, and my product and subcategory tables are also serving as foreign keys as well. So I've got ones on the lookup side of every single one of my tables, and I've got asterisks, which indicate the many side of the relationship on both data tables. So that one checks out. Number two, filters are all one way, no two-way filters here. So I'm looking at the arrows now, checking that A, the relationship points to the data table downstream, and B, it's only a single arrow, not a bi-directional arrow here. Looks good, looks good, looks good. Okay, number two checks out. Three, filter direction correctly flows downstream to the data tables. We just did that by checking the direction of the arrow. Data tables are not connected directly to one another. As you can see, both data tables are connected to each valid lookup, which makes sense. We did not try to force any sort of crazy many-to-many relationship between sales and returns. So that one checks out as well. That hits number 5, connected to all valid lookups. We can confirm that each of the foreign keys in our data tables is currently connected. order date, stock date, product, customer, territory from sales, return, territory, product from returns. So all we have left are some of these numerical values. We've got an order number in the sales table that's not connected to anything, which is okay. We've got our order line item and our order quantity, as well as return quantity for returns. And then last little item in question number 2 is that our product related tables follow a snowflake schema, which as we can see, they do. We've got that lookup chain extending out from the data tables. So that wraps number 2. Let's go ahead and move on to number 3, which is returning to the report view. So let's go ahead and head back to our canvas, and we're going to edit our matrix visual to show return quantity by category name on rows from the AW product category lookup table. So in this case, we don't need order quantity yet, and we're not showing this by sales territory key. We've got return quantity here in our values, and we need category name from the product category table, which we can drag this pane a little bit out so that we can read it better. So category name on our rows. So there you have it. Which category saw the highest volume of returns and how many? Looks like accessories drove the highest volume at 1,130 total returns. Next up, we're going to replace this category name with year from our calendar table. So we'll delete that, drill into calendar. One note here, you can use the search bar as well, which gets really helpful if you have tons and tons of fields. We're going to be building out a number of new measures, so this field list is going to keep growing. So you can just simply search for a text string like year. You can see, okay, in my calendar lookup, I've got this year field, which is what I want in this case. I'm going to drag year into rows, and then you can just delete that search bar, take you back to the full list. So this part of the question asks, okay, how many returns do you see in 2015 versus 2016? In this case, I see a total of 86 returns in 2015, 770 in 2016. Last but not least, let's pull year out and drill into our customer lookup table. We need the full name column from here. We're going to drag that into our rows. So what do we see and why do we see it? Well, obviously what we see is a series of repeating identical return quantity values, 1,828, which also happens to be the grand total, not a coincidence. And the reason why we're seeing that is because we're trying to filter on a field from the customer lookup table. And because we don't have a relationship between the customer lookup and the return table, there's no way for that filter context to pass down to the data table to filter those values properly. And then last item for question 3, we're going to update this matrix to show both order quantity and returns by product key from the product lookup table. So let's go ahead down to our sales table, drill in, we need order quantity. I'm going to pull it in front of return quantity, doesn't really matter. And now instead of full name, we're going to drill into our AW product lookup table and grab the product key from there and drop that on rows. So here we go, orders and returns by product key from the lookup table. So what was the total order quantity for product number 338? Here it is. We've got total order quantity of 50. So make sure you're seeing a total of 50 for product 338. Now moving on to question 4, what we need to do now is unhide the product key field from our returns table. And we can do that using either approach, from the data view or the relationships view. We kind of go in order to data. We're in our returns table here. I could simply right click and click the hide and report view to uncheck that option. Now you can see it's no longer grayed out here. Again, we could have also done that from the relationships view by right clicking the field itself and choosing this second option. Now if we return to report and get rid of product key from the lookup, which yields correct values, go into returns, grab that version of the product key, which is now visible, and pull that into rows. Now we see that issue with our order quantity values. So that same grand total, 84,174 in every single row. And remember, the reason why that's the case, and sometimes it's helpful to visualize this, is that we created filter context by using product key out of this returns table. Since that filter context can't pass upstream against the direction of the arrow, it can't transmit up to the product lookup table and therefore has no possible way to get to the AW sales table, since that's the only possible path between returns and sales. So as a result, the data here in the sales table, the values of order quantity, have no idea that you just filtered anything in AW returns. Therefore, it knows nothing but to return that same grand total unfiltered value over and over and over again. So here's where things get a little bit interesting. Let's actually edit this relationship between AW returns and product lookup. And what it asks us to do here in the second part of question 4 is to change the cross filter direction from single to both. And when we press OK, we'll see the little arrow icon convert from a single arrow to a double arrow. Now we have a two-way relationship between returns and product. And now, returning to our matrix, we see what appear to be correct versions of this order quantity field, or these values. So the reason why we no longer see duplicates here is because we've essentially enabled the filter context from filtering down here in the returns table to transmit up to the lookup, which is then able to pass down to sales. So now sales has some insight into what you just filtered in the returns table, because we've kind of allowed that filter context to escape. It's no longer trapped in that returns table. We've given it an exit through this relationship to product lookup. But before we celebrate, let's talk about product 338 again, which, if you remember in question 3, we saw that it generated 50 sales or 50 orders. So let's go down and look for 338. And as you can see, we jumped from 336 to 340. It's completely missing from the table. So what is going on here, right? And this gets back to our whole word of caution, word of warning about using two-way filters. So remember, when we created that filter context by filtering product keys in the returns table, we passed along that context to the AW product lookup table, but that context, that filter information, only included territories that appeared here in the returns table, only territories where a return was recorded in the data set. So as a result, product number 338 no longer exists because it's been filtered out as the context flowed up to the product lookup table. And as a result, as that context passes down to sales, product 338 is no longer even in the picture. So we've created a view that looks to be accurate, but it's invalid because we're missing some products that generated orders, generated sales, but did not show up in the return data set because they didn't generate any returns. So really fascinating stuff once you start to really dig in and understand what's going on. And that brings us to the final question in the homework. We've got to complete a few items for question number 5. And to do that, we're going to go back to relationships. First things first, we want to change this cross filter direction back to single or one way. So we can double click to edit, cross filter direction, single. Okay, and there you go. Now we've got our one way arrow. Next up, we want to hide the product key field in this returns table. I'm going to do it right here. Hide in report view. Boom, it's grayed out. We're done. Then update our matrix to show product key from the lookup table instead of the return table. Pull that out. And we've got our product table here, product key on rows. And we are done with the homework. So that wraps it up. That wraps up our data modeling section. I'd recommend that you do save some backup copies of this Power BI file elsewhere in your computer, but that just about does it. So next up, get ready to learn some DAX.